don't know about you, but client complaints are probably one of the things that trigger me the most out of everything I do in my business. But I think we can all agree that having clients who are unhappy about something at some point is inevitable in any type of business that you run. So I decided earlier this year to really sit with exactly what it is about client complaints that make me feel so uncomfortable and what it is that triggers me so much, and how I could turn this from something that triggers me and shift it instead into something that I can use to make my business better. So, in this episode, I'm sharing yet another one of the biggest lessons that I have learned and had to really internalize and do the work on as I have grown my business and my team and my net worth. In this episode, I'm going to share some of my biggest takeaways from doing the work around shifting client complaints from being something that triggers me into something helpful, and some of the things that we are doing in both of my businesses in order to get better feedback, get more feedback from clients, and overall just try to make processes better for everybody involved. This is the Profit and Prosper podcast, the podcast that helps you pay yourself 6 figures from your business without having to sacrifice your life today. First, I want to tell you a story about what happened over the last 6 to 9 months that really increased the volume of questions and concerns and things being shared from clients. And I'm going to be very upfront. I mean, I've already said this is probably the thing that triggers me the most. Recording this episode is really making me feel some type of way. But I think it's really important to share because I want you to know that everybody has to deal with client issues at some point. It is inevitable in business. And I want to share because I want to normalize it. Normalize it because I think when we see people online sharing about how successful their businesses are, they're sharing the positive screenshots, right? They're sharing the testimonials they get from clients who love them, not the complaints that they get from the people who didn't have a good time or who didn't get what they originally came for. So since last summer, I have had a ton of changes in Young & Co. and specifically around the tax team, from hiring a full-time tax manager to taking one of our contractors full-time. And then we bought another firm last summer that was heavy on tax work and rolled that into Young & Co. And, with that came different ways of doing business, another team member, more clients, just all sorts of things. And on top of that, this year, we also set up a new client portal system last year, and this was our first tax season using the portal. We also now have a client care person there, and so basically, you name it, something changed at Young & Co. when it came to the tax team. And I think due to all of those changes, due to the increase in the volume of clients from the firm that we bought, and due to us changing from a very old school manual way of doing the work into the modern way of doing the work, I felt like my inbox during tax season was constantly full of people with questions, with issues, with complaints, people who didn't like using the online portal, people who didn't like the way that we did their taxes. You name it. Like, I just felt like every day I was opening my email inbox and I would have something to address or something that me or my team was going to have to address. And after a while, that really wears you down. So I knew going into it, buying this firm, I knew that some of these things were going to come up, but that didn't make it easier in the meantime because I have always been the gold star student type. I am a people pleaser. I fully own up to that, and I definitely work on changing that, but that makes it really hard for me. I like to do things right. I like to make people happy. I like to get gold stars and straight A's, and it's really hard for me when I get that feedback, right? For that reason, it's always been hard for me. I've always tended to want to avoid asking for feedback because I always envision the worst. I always envision somebody just reaming me and telling me how horrible I am and how horrible the experience was and how they think that we shouldn't be in business anymore. And then I spiral into, the whole business is therefore going to fail. And why would I not avoid asking for feedback if that's what's going on in my head? So we had this, all of these changes during tax season, which is already a busy and stressful time. And the day after April 15th, I remember sending this like word vomit Slack message to our fractional COO who came on to help us document and improve our systems over there. And I was like, listen, here's all the things. Here are the questions that came up most frequently. Here were the issues that came up most frequently. Here's the things that, sometimes the team would forget to send this out. We need to make sure they don't forget these things. Here's the things that were missed. We need to build out processes to make sure these things weren't missed. And I was just like, here's all the things that we need to improve. But I just remember feeling so overwhelmed by it. And I sat with it one day and I realized I have to make a shift in how I interpret this feedback, because I immediately go to thinking that it's about me and making it mean something about me as a person. And the shift that I made actually came after a personal training session. The place that I go, my trainer is the owner of the studio, and she also has, interestingly, another gym that she owns down in Florida near the other farm that we bought, actually. And she has somebody down there who runs that for her, and she's not super involved. And so I remember asking her right around that same time that I was thinking through all the changes that needed to be made. I said, how do you run that business down there and not get involved in the day-to-day? And do you ever get client complaints? Like, do you ever have issues come up? And like, how do you deal with it? And she said, oh yeah, we get complaints all the time. She said the shift that she had to make for that gym down there and for her team up here too was to recognize that no team member, as amazing as they are, no team member is ever going to replace you, and they are never going to be able to do the exact same level of work that you would do. No one cares about your business as much as you do, which we know this, right? And she said that going into it, you have to expect a certain level of mistakes to be made, of misses to be had, of poor experiences to be had, but you have to, and this is my words, instead of taking that as a sign that I was a terrible person, which I was, right? Taking it as a sign that I need to put my business owner hat on and say, you know what? This is part of business. How can I use this to improve things? How can I use this as data to improve our processes and systems and workflows, to find, here's the things that we missed. Let's fix it so that we reduce that going forward, right? Let's use this as data and make things better. And I had to shift from taking it very personally and being about me to putting my business owner hat on and saying, you know what, we are going to go in expecting a certain level of mistakes. We cannot be perfect. We are all, every single one of us, we're human beings, right? We are not perfect. And so you have to go in knowing that since we're not perfect, there will be misses, absolutely. And we do what we can do to best reduce the amount of mistakes that are made, right? That is the absolute best thing that you can do. And that was my main takeaway after this last busy season when, I went into it thinking I've got 3 full-time people, a couple contractors, I've got a client care person, I've got software, I've got all these things I need. I shouldn't get pulled into the day-to-day. And then what happened was all of these things started popping up, and I got stressed and I went back into my default mode of getting sucked into the day-to-day work because I was stressed. And that is my stress response, is I feel more comfortable when I'm jumping in to do things. So lessons learned, right? Client complaints are not about you. They don't mean anything about you as a human being. Put your business owner hat on and ask yourself, what can you do to address the complaints? Always take the approach of this is fixable, right? Unless you're like, performing surgery on someone, which I don't think any of us are. But unless you're doing something that's literally life or death, like these things are fixable. And so taking the approach of open and honest communication, in my experience, always is the right thing to do. And taking the approach of we're going to do our best as human beings. If there's a mistake, we will fix it. Okay. It is all fixable. I do also want to share another point about a potential source of client complaints. And I actually don't love the word complaint. I keep saying it over and over again, but I don't know what else to call it, so we're going to roll with it. One of the things that people tell me about growing their business and building out a team that handles the client work is that they are afraid of their client's response when they step out of the day-to-day and when they start having someone else on their team start delivering instead of them doing all of the work, right? Instead of them being the primary point of contact for clients. And they're afraid that if they pull out in that way, that their client's going to be mad and they're going to leave. And I'm going to tell you that with all of this shift that we've had going on with building out our team, and then also with me starting my own separate coaching business, that it is something that has come up. And it's okay. We've only had really a handful of clients, but it has definitely happened where, people have been accustomed to working primarily with me. But over on the Young & Co side, I mean, we have too much volume in order for me to be able to handle every single client one-on-one. And in the episode that I did on the moneymakers, you handling every single client one-on-one is not a moneymaker, right? And it feels harsh to say that, but it's just the truth. And so all that I can do is when this happens, actually, it can definitely make your team not feel great when a client is, saying like, well, we're used to meeting with Sarah. We don't necessarily want to meet with this person anymore. In that case, I always choose to, stand up for my team, make sure the client knows like I'm hiring people who are highly qualified and I'm doing everything in my power to make sure that they're able to do a good job. And I totally understand, if you want to work more closely with one particular person and not a team member, then that's fine, and that's just not the way that I'm going to be able to structure my business because I just can't personally, this is my own personal boundary, but I just can't personally do it. So in any way, shape, or form that clients have issues, again, it's always fixable. But I guess the reason I wanted to share that story is that it's not worth sacrificing your boundaries over it. So after going through all of that, here are the things that we are implementing at Young & Co. I'm also taking a lot of this into my coaching business too, although honestly, I've always felt like with coaching and teaching things, it's a lot easier to get feedback. Even if the feedback is more informal, you can get pretty quick feedback from the coaching business around whether people are happy or not, just through regular conversation. You can very clearly see whether they're making progress or not. Versus with a done for you service type of business, we're the ones doing the work, we're the ones implementing things. And so it can be really hard to get that feedback unless you ask. So here's some of the things that we are incorporating. Number one, we are implementing a quarterly communication. And so I know a lot of you listening are Young & Co clients. You probably have already gotten this email. By the time I've recorded this, I think it's gone out. But we are sending out a quarterly communication that is going to outline all of the things that happened in the last quarter. Just say, hey, here's what we did in the last quarter. And here is what is coming up, looking ahead in the next quarter. Remember deadlines for you to keep in mind. And then I'm also including in that email for, most of the levels, we are reminding them about the services that we're doing for them, the ways that they can take advantage of working with us, and just the things that are not included from, conversations and questions I've had from clients who are like, I don't know if this is included or not. And so giving them that clarity more proactively. And so putting in there, hey, in this level you're in, it doesn't include tax planning, but this is a great time of year. So if you do want to start getting into tax planning, especially for people who maybe had a big tax bill, using that as an opportunity to say, hey, as a reminder, this is our boundary. These things are not included in the level you're in, but if you want to add them on, if this would be helpful for you, we are here to help you do that. The other thing that's going in that communication is a feedback survey. And we ended up I went back and forth for a while on what questions to ask in the feedback survey. But what we landed on, because we're sending this out to at least 200, I think, I don't remember, What we ended up doing is the Net Promoter Score question, which is kind of a like standard marketing type question that basically says, how likely are you to refer us to a friend? But it asks them to rate on a scale from like 1 to 10, 10 being the most likely. How likely are you to refer us? And that question, especially for a service-based business, I think is so great because to me, the clients who give us the most referrals are the ones who are the happiest with us. And if somebody's not going to refer you, then that's a sign that you probably could do some work to beef up that relationship, right? So that's one of the things we're including in that quarterly email, and we will do that every single quarter and use the information. So it'll ask them the question about how likely are you to refer us, and then asking a follow-up question depending on how they rated that scale to give us more information. And then we can also use that so that, our client care person can reach out to people and either say, hey, we're so glad that you rated us so highly. We love to hear it. Getting testimonials from them is something I definitely need to do better at. A lot of us could do better at remembering to ask for testimonials. But then if they didn't rate us highly, she can follow up and more specifically say, hey, let's have a conversation. We'd love to, make things better. What can we do just to get better feedback from them? And those are the things that even though it's so hard to ask for that feedback and it's so hard to hear feedback that isn't always positive, that is the feedback that is the most helpful for you to have as a business owner. The last thing that we're doing is I'm taking, I sent that word vomit to our fractional COO, and I use that to say, hey, listen, here's where we struggled. Here are the things where, the team forgot this, or we missed this, or, clients were frequently asking us about this. And I said, you help me put things into place to proactively mitigate those issues that are popping up. And so we're starting with the biggest, most pervasive issues that we had and implementing better processes and training in those areas too, in order to mitigate those. And then we will just keep doing that process of continuous improvement over and over again, probably forever. I don't think you'll ever get to a place where everything is perfect and you're totally happy with it. I mean, you probably could at some point, but we'll just keep iterating on it until, we feel really, really good about the process. So that is it for this episode on client complaints. The thing that I will say to sum it up is that I firmly believe that growing a business will force you to address all of your fears and your triggers and the things that cause your nervous system to spike. Most people will use that as an excuse to not do the thing. Most people will use that as an excuse to not even go down the business ownership path. And then most people who start businesses will keep their businesses on the smaller side, not because they don't want to make more money. I think almost every person really inside does want to make more money, but they'll keep them small out of the fear of addressing those scary things. And so I'm here to tell you I won't say I'm on the other side, because this is something that we're going to be constantly working on. Anytime you work with any kind of customer, you are going to have complaints come up. You're going to have to work through issues. But it was a huge turning point for me to recognize that that was my own trigger popping up. And I mean little t trigger, obviously. That was my own, issue coming to rise. That was my own fear coming up about not being enough and not working hard enough and not making people happy enough, that was preventing me from asking for feedback and making the improvements that we needed to make. So recognize that there may be areas in your business that you are holding yourself back out of fear. And my take is, I think you have to address those in one way or another in your life. Otherwise, you'll end up being this, old angry person because you never got to fully live your life because you held yourself back out of fear. Okay. We're going to need to address those one way or the other. It's going to come up as you run your business. So let's take the time now to work through it. Okay. To practice it. So that was one of the biggest lessons that I've had to learn in my business, and it is an ongoing thing. And I would be lying if I said that it was easy to come on here and talk about this, where hundreds of people will listen to this episode. It's not easy to do that, but I really truly hope that by talking about these things behind the curtain, that it will help you to know that you're not alone in going through these things and to have some better tools and resources to be able to work through it. So that was it for this episode, y'all. I hope that you enjoyed hearing about my, things that I'm personally working through. And my final ask before I leave is that if you found this episode helpful, please share it with a friend so they can also listen to my struggles. But no, really, share it with a friend who could use some of these lessons. My hope is that I can share these lessons that I learned the hard way so that you don't have to go through all of the difficulty that I have had to address them. So that's it for this week, y'all. I'll see you back here next time. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Listening and learning is great, but implementing what you learned is even better. So what's one thing you can do this week to make more money in your business, save for your financial future, and start living your most prosperous life? If you found this episode helpful, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts and share with a friend because it helps me reach more amazing female entrepreneurs like yourself. See you in next week's episode.